There are moments in life when betrayal cuts so deeply that it feels like a piece of your soul has been torn away. The shock, the disbelief, the ache in the chest, they all merge into a single realization that something sacred has been broken. But beneath the emotional storm lies a deeper, more mysterious layer of truth. Betrayal is not merely an act committed against us, it is a mirror reflecting the unseen dimensions of our own psyche. It reveals what we have suppressed, ignored, or idealized within ourselves and others. When someone betrays us, the first instinct is to blame them, to see them as the villain who destroyed the purity of trust. Yet, betrayal has a psychological purpose. It exposes the illusions we have built around people, love, and loyalty. It forces us to confront how much of our trust was genuine and how much was born out of our unconscious need to feel safe, validated, or complete. The pain we feel is not only from their deception, but from the collapse of the version of reality we constructed. Human relationships are mirrors of the inner world. The people we are drawn to often embody traits that lie dormant within us, both our light and our shadow. When betrayal occurs, it is rarely random. It is an energetic confrontation between who we think we are and what we refuse to see. The betrayer becomes the instrument through which the unconscious demands recognition. Their act becomes a reflection of something unintegrated within us, a blind spot, a suppressed truth, a boundary we never enforced. Psychologically, betrayal begins long before the act itself. It starts in the subtle moments when we ignore red flags, silence our intuition, or convince ourselves that someone is different from what they consistently show us. It begins when we trade authenticity for attachment, when we choose comfort over truth. In this way, betrayal is not only about deceit, it is also about the ways in which we betray ourselves. Every time we stay silent, when our soul screams for honesty, we lay another brick in the wall that will one day collapse under the weight of disillusionment. The mirror of betrayal reflects both sides, the betrayer and the betrayed. The one who betrays often acts out of a fractured sense of self. They project their inner conflict onto the relationship, using deception or disloyalty to escape their own inadequacy. To understand betrayal is to recognize that the betrayer is also a prisoner of their unconscious. They are not merely cruel, they are divided. Their action reveals a psyche unable to reconcile truth and desire, loyalty and fear. The betrayed, on the other hand, faces the painful task of seeing how they participated unconsciously in their own wounding. Through denial, idealization, or over-trust, the power of this mirror lies in its brutal honesty. It shows us where we are still naive, where we seek saviors, where we refuse to stand in our own authority. It reveals the inner contracts we have made with others. I will give you my loyalty if you give me validation. Or, I will overlook your darkness if you never abandon me. These silent agreements are written not in words, but in emotional dependency. And a betrayal is the event that tears up that hidden contract, forcing us to stand face to face with the parts of ourselves that relied too heavily on illusion. To look into the mirror of betrayal without turning away is to grow. It requires courage to see that the person who deceived you also played a role that your soul, at some unconscious level, needed to experience. This is not to excuse their actions, but to understand the alchemy of the experience. Through betrayal, the false self dies. The self that believed love meant security, the self that thought trust was guaranteed, the self that mistook dependency for connection. What remains is a raw, unfiltered awareness that every bond must be rooted in truth, not fantasy. In this reflection, you also begin to see your own power. You see that no one truly has the ability to destroy your essence. They can only reveal what within you was still fragile or dependent on illusion. Betrayal is a violent teacher, but it teaches what comfort never could: the sacred importance of self-trust. When the mirror shatters, the fragments cut, but they also sparkle with insight. Each piece holds a part of your wholeness waiting to be reclaimed. There is a strange freedom in recognizing that betrayal is not the end of trust, but its purification. It burns away the naive trust that expects perfection from others and replaces it with conscious trust, one that is grounded in discernment and self-awareness. It teaches that real trust begins within, not outside. The one who has been betrayed deeply learns that boundaries are not walls of fear, but structures of respect, that love without awareness becomes attachment, and that forgiveness is not forgetting, but freeing oneself from the need to understand another's unconsciousness. The mirror of betrayal invites you to see both the darkness and the light. It reminds you that human beings are complex, contradictory, and often driven by forces they do not understand. It asks you to stop seeking purity in others and instead find authenticity within yourself. When you stop expecting people to mirror only your light, you stop being shattered by their shadow. You begin to see that betrayal, in its raw essence, is a catalyst for awakening, a painful but necessary interruption of illusion. To stand before that mirror is to confront your deepest wounds and to realize that they are also gateways. The pain that once felt like destruction becomes revelation. The person who betrayed you becomes a mirror through which you rediscover your strength, your intuition, and your truth. You learn to see yourself not as a victim of disloyalty, but as the witness of transformation unfolding through you. The mirror never lies. It only reflects what you are finally ready to see. Every relationship begins with light. The spark of recognition, the warmth of connection, the feeling of being seen. Yet beneath this light, hidden from awareness, lies the shadow, the unspoken, the repressed, the denied parts of ourselves that we unconsciously bring into every bond we form. The shadow within relationships is not a flaw in love. It is love's unacknowledged dimension. It is the part of human connection that reveals not only who we are with others, but who we are beneath the masks we wear. When we enter a relationship, we don't meet another person as they truly are. We meet them through the filter of our past, our desires, wounds, expectations, and fears. The mind projects fragments of itself onto the other, creating an image rather than seeing a reality. We idealize, romanticize, and attach meaning to their presence, yet sooner or later the mask falls. The qualities we once adored begin to irritate us. The admiration turns to resentment. What we once called love begins to feel like conflict. This is the moment when the shadow enters. The shadow within relationships is everything we have not yet owned about ourselves. It is the anger we suppress to seem kind, the jealousy we hide to appear secure, the need for control we disguise as care. The partner becomes the canvas upon which our hidden emotions are painted. When we accuse them of being selfish, distant, or cold, we often speak from the part of ourselves we have disowned. The deeper psychology of relationships reveals that every accusation is a confession disguised. We see in others what we cannot bear to confront in ourselves. Conflict, then, is not the enemy of love. It is the language of the unconscious. Through conflict, the hidden material of the psyche surfaces. When a partner triggers anger, fear, or insecurity, they are not creating these emotions, they are awakening them. The shadow within relationships thrives in projection. What we fail to acknowledge internally, we experience externally. The one we love becomes the mirror reflecting what we most need to integrate. Every disappointment, every misunderstanding, every moment of emotional tension is an invitation to self-knowledge. This dynamic explains why some relationships feel like an endless cycle of attraction and pain. We are drawn to people who carry what we have repressed. The emotionally unavailable partner might mirror our own avoidance of vulnerability. The critical lover may reflect our inner self-judgment. The one who withdraws when we seek closeness might embody the distance we keep from our own emotions. It is not coincidence, it is psychic symmetry. The shadow seeks its counterpart in the outer world to become visible. Through the other, we meet the parts of ourselves we have long abandoned. Love, in its deepest form, is not the merging of two idealized selves, but the meeting of two shadows. Real intimacy begins when the illusions dissolve, when each person stands before the other stripped of masks, carrying both their light and their darkness. To love another is to witness their shadow without trying to change it. To love consciously is to admit, I see your wounds and I recognize my own through them. Most relationships fail not because love disappears, but because people cannot face their own reflections in the other. The ego resists the discomfort of self-revelation, seeking instead the safety of blame. The shadow also shapes how we express power and vulnerability. Some people control because they fear abandonment. Others withdraw because they fear engulfment. Some overgive to earn worthiness, while others withhold affection to maintain superiority. Beneath these behaviors lie unhealed patterns, remnants of childhood experiences, emotional neglect, or past betrayals. The partner becomes the stage upon which these unresolved energies reenact themselves. We think we are arguing about the present, but we are really negotiating the past. Every emotional reaction carries the echo of something unfinished within us. The work of integrating the shadow within relationships demands honesty. It requires the courage to ask, what part of me is being mirrored here? Instead of asking why the other person acts as they do, one must ask what within the self is responding. Emotional triggers are not punishments, they are revelations. The irritation you feel when your partner criticizes you may point to your own insecurity. The fear that they will leave may reveal your inner abandonment wound. The anger you feel when they seem distant may mirror your own resistance to emotional depth. The shadow speaks in sensations, reactions, and patterns, and it repeats until acknowledged. True connection cannot exist where the shadow is denied. When both partners project their darkness onto each other, the relationship becomes a battlefield of unmet needs. But when awareness enters, conflict transforms into understanding. The purpose of love is not to escape pain, but to illuminate it. A conscious relationship is not one without struggle. It is one where struggle becomes sacred. It becomes the arena in which both individuals evolve beyond their conditioning, using each other as mirrors rather than enemies. The shadow within relationships also reveals the paradox of love. The closer we get to another, the more our hidden selves are exposed. Intimacy dismantles defenses. It brings to the surface what solitude allowed us to hide. That is why love can feel both healing and terrifying. It demands the death of the persona. The parts of us that crave control or perfection cannot survive in genuine closeness. Love forces transparency, and in that exposure, the ego trembles, fearing rejection. But that trembling is the soul's way of reminding us that vulnerability is the path to truth. When two people become conscious of this dynamic, love transforms. The relationship stops being a source of unconscious suffering and becomes a field of awareness. Each trigger becomes an opportunity to reclaim a lost fragment of the self. Each moment of tension becomes a reminder that growth and discomfort coexist. Through the mirror of the other, the self begins to integrate, not by changing who we are, but by accepting the totality of what we are. The shadow within relationships is not the destroyer of love, it is its deepest teacher, the one that reveals the dimensions of the heart hidden beneath fear, illusion, and denial. The human ego is a fascinating paradox. It is both the mask that protects us and the prison that confines us. It constructs an identity made of experiences, beliefs, memories, and fears, convincing us that this limited image is who we truly are. The ego does not seek truth, it seeks control, stability, and validation. It is fragile because it depends on external recognition to feel whole. And in relationships, this fragility often manifests as betrayal, manipulation, or conflict. Beneath every deception, every need to dominate or be right, lies the trembling insecurity of an ego terrified of its own insignificance. The ego is born from separation. From childhood, we learn to identify with labels: name, family, achievements, failures. We are taught that approval equals worth. Slowly, the authentic self, which is fluid and expansive, gets replaced by an image crafted to survive in a world of judgment. This image becomes the armor we wear, polished, protective, and rigid. Yet, like all armor, it isolates. It prevents genuine intimacy because the ego fears being truly seen. To be seen is to risk exposure, and exposure threatens the illusion of control. So the ego builds walls of pride, superiority, or indifference, and calls them strength. In the realm of relationships, the ego's armor becomes both shield and weapon. It protects us from rejection, but also prevents connection. When someone gets too close, the ego feels its boundaries blur. It interprets vulnerability as danger. That's when people begin to distance, lie, or sabotage love. Betrayal often arises not from malice, but from this unconscious fear of dissolving into another. The ego equates merging with annihilation. It betrays before it can be betrayed. It hurts before it can be hurt. It chooses illusion over authenticity because illusion feels safer than emotional nakedness. Every act of manipulation is an attempt by the ego to maintain its narrative. The one who lies wants to preserve an image, the image of being good, competent, or in control. The one who withholds affection does so to maintain power. The one who pretends indifference fears dependence. The ego's armor disguises fear as strength and control as confidence. But underneath this performance lies fragility. The unhealed belief that one's worth depends on the approval or perception of others. The tragedy of the ego's armor is that it protects us from the very experiences that would heal us. By resisting vulnerability, it resists growth. By avoiding discomfort, it avoids transformation. The ego is terrified of surrender because surrender feels like death. And in many ways, it is. It is the death of the false identity that needs to be admired, understood, and right. In truth, the ego does not want love. It wants possession. It cannot receive love freely because love dissolves control. To the ego, love is dangerous. It demands humility, openness, and the courage to be seen without defenses. In betrayal, the ego's armor becomes most visible. The person who betrays often does so when their image feels threatened. They may fear being judged, rejected, or exposed. To protect their false self, they deceive. To preserve power, they lie. The betrayer rarely acts from conscious malice. They act from unconscious fear. They are ruled by the terror of losing control, of being vulnerable, of being seen as weak. Their act of betrayal is an attempt to restore inner equilibrium, to reassert the illusion that they are in charge. But in doing so, they fracture the trust that sustains real connection. The one who is betrayed faces the mirror of this same fragility. Betrayal wounds the ego because it shatters its image of how things should be. It confronts us with the truth that we are not in control, that others' actions do not bend to our expectations. The pain that follows is not just heartbreak. It is the ego's mourning. It grieves the loss of certainty, the collapse of illusion. Yet within that collapse lies the opportunity for awakening. The destruction of false security exposes what was real all along: the self beyond the mask, beyond validation, beyond fear. The ego's armor thrives on comparison. It constantly measures itself against others, needing to feel superior or at least equal. It seeks validation through achievement, appearance, or emotional dominance. In love, this manifests as jealousy, control, or constant self-defense. The ego cannot accept imperfection in itself or in others because imperfection threatens its carefully curated image. It wants to be admired, not understood, worshipped, not confronted. But the more it demands external recognition, the more fragile it becomes. Like glass, it cracks under pressure, and when it shatters, it reveals the emptiness it was designed to hide. The ego's fragility is most visible when faced with rejection or criticism. It interprets every disagreement as a threat to survival. It cannot distinguish between being wrong and being worthless. This is why many people argue not to seek truth, but to protect their sense of identity. The ego fears humility because humility dissolves its boundaries. Yet, paradoxically, what it fears most is what it truly needs: surrender, authenticity, and silence. Only when the armor cracks can genuine connection flow. Only when we stop defending the false image can we experience the fullness of being human. The ego's armor also shapes how people perceive betrayal and forgiveness. The ego does not forgive because forgiveness feels like losing power. It feeds on resentment because resentment preserves the illusion of superiority. I am right and they are wrong becomes the ego's mantra. But this only deepens suffering. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is freedom from the ego's need to control the narrative. Yet to forgive, one must see beyond the armor, both their own and the others. One must recognize that betrayal, manipulation, and deceit are symptoms of fear, not strength. To understand the ego's fragility is to see the human condition with compassion. Every lie, every defense, every mask is a plea for safety. People do not wear armor because they want to deceive. They wear it because they fear being destroyed without it. The ego is both the protector and the saboteur. It shields the heart, but also suffocates it. It cannot love deeply because deep love requires surrender, and surrender feels like death to the ego. Yet, without this surrender, no genuine transformation can begin. The armor may keep us safe, but it also keeps us small. The moment we dare to see through its illusion, the moment we face the trembling insecurity behind it, we begin to glimpse the vastness of the self that exists beyond fear. Pain is one of the most misunderstood forces in human existence. Most people see it as punishment, a cruel intrusion into their peace, and spend their lives trying to escape it. Yet pain is not the enemy. Pain is a messenger, an alchemist, and a silent teacher that transforms the raw material of suffering into the gold of awareness. Every wound, every heartbreak, every betrayal contains within it a seed of revelation waiting to be uncovered. It is through pain that the soul evolves, shedding illusions and reclaiming authenticity. The alchemy of pain is the process by which darkness becomes wisdom and loss becomes liberation. Pain begins when something we have identified with is threatened or taken away. It could be a relationship, a dream, an image of who we thought we were. The ego resists this loss because its survival depends on attachment. When reality no longer conforms to our expectations, we feel pain as an inner tearing. But this tearing is not destruction, it is the breaking of illusion. It reveals how tightly we have clung to things, people, or identities to feel complete. Pain exposes dependency. It confronts us with the truth that what we thought was love may have been attachment, and what we called peace may have been avoidance. In the psychological sense, pain is the language of transformation. When the conscious mind refuses to evolve, life uses pain to awaken it. The same way the body uses fever to burn out infection, the psyche uses pain to dissolve denial. It is an inner fire that purifies everything false. We suffer most not because of what happens to us, but because we resist what is happening. The more we cling to control, the more pain intensifies. But when we stop fighting it and start listening to it, pain reveals its hidden intelligence. It shows us where we are still asleep, where we still live from fear instead of awareness. The alchemy begins when pain is faced consciously. Instead of drowning in it or numbing it, one turns inward and allows it to speak. Pain has a voice, quiet but relentless. It asks uncomfortable questions. What illusion are you protecting? What truth are you avoiding? What part of yourself have you abandoned? These questions do not come from cruelty, but from love, a fierce love that seeks to bring the unconscious into light. Pain does not want to destroy you, it wants to make you whole. But wholeness requires loss, the loss of the false self, the loss of certainty, the loss of control. When you enter pain without resistance, you enter the crucible of transformation. Like metal in a furnace, the personality softens. Old defenses begin to melt, and what remains is raw, unfiltered being. The heart, once armored, becomes porous. The mind, once rigid, becomes humble. Suffering refines perception, stripping away the arrogance of the ego and the illusions of permanence. You begin to see that life was never meant to conform to your will. It was meant to reveal your essence. Pain opens this realization by shattering what you thought you needed in order to be whole. Through this process, something miraculous occurs. The same energy that once created suffering begins to generate awareness. The fire that burned now illuminates. This is the essence of alchemy, the transmutation of one state of consciousness into another. In spiritual psychology, this is known as individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are beyond the masks and wounds. Pain, in this sense, is the great awakener. It strips away every illusion until only truth remains. It is the bridge between unconscious existence and conscious living, But this transformation does not happen through avoidance. Modern culture teaches people to run from pain, to distract, to medicate, to escape through pleasure or performance. Yet every time pain is suppressed, it burrows deeper into the psyche, transforming into anxiety, depression, or emotional numbness. Avoided pain does not disappear, it waits. It waits for silence, for collapse, for the moment when distraction no longer works. Then it resurfaces, demanding attention. Facing it consciously is not weakness. It is courage of the highest kind. It is the willingness to sit in the fire until it turns into light. Pain also reveals the limits of egoic control. When suffering becomes unbearable, the mind realizes it cannot fix or rationalize it. This is when surrender begins, not the passive surrender of giving up, but the sacred surrender of letting go of resistance, of expectations, of the illusion that life owes you comfort. In this surrender, something deeper awakens. The awareness that witnesses pain is untouched by it. You start to sense the presence within you that observes the suffering, but is not consumed by it. This witnessing consciousness is the philosopher's stone of inner alchemy, the element that turns the lead of despair into the gold of clarity. In betrayal, heartbreak, or failure, pain strips away everything superficial. It silences noise and forces introspection. The person you thought you were begins to dissolve, and what remains is something more authentic. You begin to understand that growth often wears the mask of loss. Every ending conceals a beginning. Every pain conceals a message. Evolve, release, awaken. The heart, when broken open, expands its capacity to love, not because it forgets the wound, but because it learns compassion through it. The mind, when humbled by suffering, gains wisdom not found in comfort. Pain carves space for depth. There is an ancient truth that the psyche cannot expand without tension, just as gold cannot be purified without fire. Pain is that fire. It burns away illusions and reveals essence. The more consciously one endures it, the more luminous one becomes. It refines perception, deepens empathy, and strengthens the soul's resilience. When you look closely, every person who carries genuine wisdom has walked through pain. Their strength does not come from avoidance, but from integration, from allowing suffering to sculpt them into something real. The alchemy of pain transforms because it demands truth. It refuses superficial answers. It does not allow pretense or comfort to mask fear. Pain insists on honesty, not just with others, but with oneself. It reveals what still clings to validation, what still fears rejection, what still hides from its own potential. In that exposure lies purification. It is through the furnace of pain that the human spirit discovers its depth, and through that depth it rediscovers its power to rise beyond the very wounds that once defined it. There comes a point in every person's journey when the noise of the world becomes unbearable, when external validation, approval, and belonging no longer soothe the inner disquiet. This is the moment the psyche begins to awaken, calling us to reclaim the authority we once gave away. Inner authority is not domination, control, or defiance. It is sovereignty over one's own mind, emotions, and energy. It is the quiet realization that truth cannot be outsourced, and that freedom begins when dependence ends. To reclaim inner authority is to return to the center of your own being, to the place where clarity, integrity, and intuition dwell uncorrupted by fear or influence. From birth, we are conditioned to seek authority outside ourselves. Parents, teachers, religions, governments, and cultures all shape our perception of right and wrong, success and failure, worth and shame. Slowly, the voice within, the intuitive compass that once guided us effortlessly, becomes muted beneath layers of obedience and expectation. We learn to please, to perform, to adapt. We trade authenticity for acceptance. This early surrender of power is rarely conscious, but it becomes the foundation upon which adult insecurities are built. The result is a self that looks outward for permission to exist, to speak, to feel, and to act. Reclaiming inner authority begins the moment one questions this conditioning. The moment you ask, "Whose voice is this in my head?" you have already begun to awaken. Every belief, every fear, every emotional reaction becomes a map leading you back to the place where authority was once handed over. It requires immense courage to see how deeply external influences shape identity. Most people mistake conformity for peace, but it is only paralysis disguised as harmony. True peace arises when the inner and outer worlds align, when one's actions flow from inner truth rather than social pressure. The psychology behind reclaiming inner authority is rooted in integration. The human psyche consists of conscious and unconscious elements, thoughts, desires, wounds, and instincts. When we deny parts of ourselves to fit into collective ideals, we fragment. Those denied aspects become projections, addictions, or dependencies. The more disconnected we become from our own power, the more we rely on others to define our reality. This dependence is the root of manipulation, resentment, and confusion in relationships. To reclaim inner authority, one must gather these fragments, acknowledge their purpose, and bring them back into awareness. At its core, reclaiming authority is about remembering that no external figure, no partner, mentor, ideology, or system can dictate your inner truth. Others can guide, inspire, or challenge, but the final authority over your choices must belong to you. When this balance is restored, something extraordinary happens. Decisions begin to arise not from fear, but from clarity. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What feels true for me?" This shift marks the transition from unconscious living to conscious creation. Yet this process is not gentle. The moment you reclaim authority, resistance surfaces. The mind, long accustomed to approval and validation, trembles at the thought of standing alone. The ego whispers, "You will lose love. You will be rejected. You will be wrong." And in a sense, it is correct. You will lose the false love that thrives on conformity. You will be rejected by those who benefited from your compliance. You will be wrong according to the standards of those who never questioned their own. But through that loss, you will gain something irreplaceable, the unshakable knowing that your life is your own. The reclaiming of inner authority also requires confronting the fear of isolation. The psyche, in its early stages of awakening, often confuses autonomy with loneliness. But true sovereignty does not mean detachment from others. It means connection without dependency. When you no longer need others to approve of your existence, your relationships transform. Love becomes freedom instead of control. Boundaries become acts of respect rather than walls of defense. You begin to attract those who resonate with your authenticity instead of those who feed on your submission. Psychologically, reclaiming authority is an act of integration between the conscious self and the deeper intuitive self. The conscious mind is logical, linear, and conditioned. The intuitive self is nonlinear, ancient, and deeply knowing. When authority is externalized, logic dominates intuition, leading to chronic indecision, self-doubt, and anxiety. But when the two merge, when intuition is given equal weight, the psyche becomes whole. You begin to move with an inner rhythm, trusting that your own wisdom is enough to guide you through uncertainty. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every manipulation by others is an invitation to reclaim authority. When someone deceives you, it exposes where you trusted their word more than your own instinct. When someone abandons you, it reveals where you abandoned your inner stability. Painful experiences serve as mirrors, reflecting where we have handed over power unconsciously. Each time you withdraw that projection, each time you say, "I no longer need you to define me," the fragments of your sovereignty return home. Reclaiming inner authority also demands the death of the victim identity. The victim mind believes that life happens to it, not through it. It blames circumstances, fate, or others for its suffering. This mindset feeds dependency because it denies agency. The moment you realize that your perception creates your reality, the victim dissolves. You begin to see that even in chaos, choice remains. You may not control what happens, but you can always choose your response. That choice is the birthplace of power. To reclaim authority is to stand in the silent, knowing that you are enough, not as a belief, but as an embodied truth. It means trusting your emotions without being ruled by them, honoring your intuition without needing proof, and acting in alignment with your values even when no one understands. It is not rebellion against authority, but alignment with inner order. It is not pride, but presence. When this authority is reclaimed, life changes its texture. Decisions feel lighter. The opinions of others lose their weight. Chaos no longer provokes panic because you know where your center lies. You begin to navigate existence not as a puppet of circumstance, but as a conscious participant in your own unfolding. Every external challenge becomes a test of alignment, not of obedience. The more you trust this inner compass, the more life begins to reflect it back. You meet situations that match your integrity. You encounter people who honor your truth rather than demand your conformity. Reclaiming inner authority is the return of power from illusion to essence. It is the soul remembering that guidance does not come from noise, but from silence. It is the moment you stop waiting for permission to be yourself and begin to embody it fully. It is the quiet revolution that begins not in defiance of the world, but in the realization that everything you once sought outside was waiting patiently within.